All right, welcome to the conversation. Speaking of which, we're gonna have a conversation right now that's going to be both serious and fun. Can you leave your estate to cats? I'm looking forward to the answer. We're gonna find that out, but we're also gonna talk about some serious issues with our guest, Judge LaDoris Hazzard Cordell. She's written a book, Her Honor. She was the first African-American woman jurist in Northern California. She was Assistant Dean of Stanford Law School, Vice Provost of Stanford University. She's won so many awards it would take up the rest of the interview, so I'm gonna skip that. Judge Cordell, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be talking to you.
Thank you, that's wonderful of you to say. So you've been involved in political cases, non-political cases, but first I want to start with the fact that you're a trailblazer. So I imagine that it was different for you being an African-American female judge as opposed to white male judge, but how was it different? That's what I was curious about.
Sure. When I went on the bench, this had been in the early 1980s, there had been no black woman judge at all in all of Northern California, which is a little shocking, but it was the case. So the pressure was on. The pressure was on from my own community, from the black community, from brown communities, pressure not to mess up. And it's true, whenever you're the first of anything, any kind, there's always pressure. People are always watching because no one like you has been in that position. So it was pressure to not mess up, to represent and make things make us look good. And then on the other side, there were I'd say like the good old boys who basically were waiting for me to mess up. It's like, oh, it's only a matter of time and she's not gonna fit in. People weren't actively saying that, but the pressure was there. I could feel the tension, and most of it came from people who had been in the system long, like prosecutors and older white male judges who weren't used to and didn't want a whole lot of change. So pressure was on, and I knew that the only way to deal with this, and this has been the story of my whole life, always be prepared and just know your stuff, and that's what I did.
Yeah, and so it's amazing how recent progress in this country has been. My co-founder, Dave Kohler, his mom is the first chair of a physics department of any college in America. And so for it, not just as an African American, but as a woman, there's so many firsts in our lifetimes. You were the first. It's amazing. It's amazing. So and you wrote about how you also had pressure from defendants to understand them better. Right, and so and I thought that was super interesting. But one more question about that: did the folks who were put the pressure on you, thinking that you were going to fail, did they also think, oh, she's probably going to be soft on defendants because she might actually understand them? And God forbid you should do that.
Yeah. So and you actually hit it exactly right, because word would come out. I have to tell you, the courthouses, the grapevine, the gossip and the grapevine is just ridiculous. Everybody knows what everybody's doing, or at least thinks they know. And word was coming down quite clearly, primarily from prosecutors who, most people don't know this, but prosecutors have more power than judges. So the prosecutors, and I'm talking criminal cases here, decide what charges to bring. Judges can't decide that. So whatever comes in the courtroom comes in the courtroom. And prosecutors who were used to being in charge and also being in front of judges who were former prosecutors. So when I came on the bench, there were very few people coming on with my background. I was a criminal defense attorney on the defense side. So there was the expectation she's gonna be soft, she's gonna give really low sentences, and she's not gonna set high enough bail. All those kinds of things were being said. And part of this work is just gotta ignore it, and you have to do what you believe to be right. And sometimes, as I write in the book, it can be very difficult.
Yeah, it's amazing the gaslighting that happens, because the assumption is that you should not be open-minded to defendants. And so they put pressure on people who are actually being good judges and actually judging the case on its merits and are open-minded and reasonable, as you're supposed to be to a judge. But if you said to them, oh, this guy doesn't actually even take defendants into account, they'd be like, what? How dare you, right? So I'm fascinated by all that. But speaking of which, there was a judge in Northern California who people thought was too open-minded towards the defendant, and that was Judge Aaron Persky. And that was in the infamous Brock Turner case, and that was, of course, the rape case that came out of Stanford. So you campaigned against his recall, and I'm fascinated by that. So tell me more about that. Why'd you do that? What'd you think?
Accused, and I write about the recall of Aaron Persky, because when that happened, I had retired from the bench. And people who were pushing to recall him, I could hear them, they would all saying, well, why are you, pointing to me, why are you talking about him? Why isn't the judge defending himself? And what people didn't understand is that trial judges at the time have no right of self-defense. That if there's a case pending before a judge cannot say anything about the case, no matter how badly people are portraying the case and the decision. I took a stand of supporting Judge Persky and against the recall, because this recall was nothing more than a threat to judicial independence. And I was stunned. Here I am in Silicon Valley, very educated electorate. And when I would put this out there, judicial independence, I'd get responses like, well, what's that? Or I'd get response, that's just another way of judges just circling the wagon. I mean, I was absolutely stunned. And what people didn't appreciate, and many people still don't, is that there are three prongs to our democracy. You have the legislative branch, the executive, and the judiciary. And if one of those legs gets pulled out, we don't have a democracy anymore. So judicial independence, everybody who's ever been in court, absolutely, without fail, wants a judge to listen carefully, listen to the facts, apply the law, and then make a good decision. Nobody wants a judge to hold up and then, oh, wait a minute, put the finger to the wind and test out whether or not the public might have a problem with the decision, might find it too controversial, might lose their job, as in a recall. So judicial independence has to be a part of our judiciary. But since that recall, trial court judges are doing just that. They are basically really concerned about being recalled because they might make a decision that's controversial. I find that horrible. I find it frightening, and that's why in the book I have a chapter called The Fix, where I suggest 10 things that could make this system better and to fix the things that are broken. And one of them is to change the rules about recalls. Not every state allows judges to be recalled, but those that do, like in California, you can recall a judge for anything you want. You don't like the way the judge dresses, okay, have a recall. There are only 2 states, I note in the book, that say you can only recall a judge if the judge engages in malfeasance, misconduct, or has been convicted of a serious crime. And I believe, and my recommendation in The Fix is that every state should have that rule. No judge should be recalled for making a lawful decision. Judge Persky made a lawful decision, a controversial one, but it was a lawful one. The other thing I just want to point out to you is that people got all upset because the sentence they felt wasn't harsh enough, or wasn't punitive enough, because he gave this young man 6 months in jail. Nobody gets upset when judges hand down harsh sentences and send people away for 50 years to life, 20 years to life. You never hear about judges getting recalled for that. And it's very sad that we have become, and for a long time, such a punitive society when it comes to dealing with individuals who have violated the law, and where the system can be utilized to certainly punish, but also to work for redemption. And that's what I find so sad about what the system is like now.
So I definitely understand what you're saying about judicial independence, and I understand that you're doing it out of principle. At the same time, I just want to push back a little bit on that idea, on that principle, because what if so in that case, it was a judge who seemed to empathize with the defendant, and then talked about his swimming career or something along those lines when a woman had been raped. And I know you're doing it out of principle, but the funny thing is, I was gonna say, give the example that you gave, which is, what if a judge said, hey, you know what? I don't empathize with any of these black defendants, so I'm giving them all 50 years, okay? Well, if you say that because they're black, yes, that could be an actual legal issue. But if they don't say it, but it's still clear, is your position, no, it's terrible. He's putting away people that don't deserve those kind of sentences, but he didn't break the law, so it is what it is.
Right. Well, two things. One is I don't think judges should empathize with people. We're human beings. We wear the robes, but we all come from different backgrounds that inform who we are and how we make decisions. What's critical is that we follow the law and uphold our oath to follow the law, both under the US Constitution and whatever the state constitution is. So I don't think it's about empathy. It's about looking at the rules. So the rules when in sentencing are that they're all spelled out. You look at the circumstances surrounding the victim, the crime, the sophistication or lack thereof of the defendant, and then you look at the defendant's background. That's what we're required to do. So it's not the empathy, it's about using our own experiences to inform how we impose sentences. The second part of your question was, about how, what if a judge just imposes harsh sentences all the time? Here's the deal. Judges should be held accountable. And I have no problem with recalls holding judges accountable. But again, recalls should be when a judge has broken the law or violated it. But there are other ways to hold that really punitive judge accountable. And that is trial court judges are all subjected to limited terms. So that judge could not be reelected if the judge decided that the judge wanted to stay on in another term. Judges are also subject to the appellate courts where the decisions of trial judges can be reversed and we can be told you didn't make the right decision and either do it again or just convictions reversed or have to do sentencing again. So it's not like judges aren't held accountable. Take for example, what about this judge in Wisconsin? Bruce Schroeder in the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse, who went in the streets and was just killed 2 protesters and injured 1. And this judge has said, no, we're not going to call those dead people and the injured person victims. You can call them rioters and arsonists, but no, not victims. Well, legally, can he do it? Yeah, he's in charge, he has discretion. But if people are concerned about that, I certainly am. I have a chapter in my book called Bad Judges. He belongs in that chapter. Then we have people, voters, have the wherewithal to hold the judge accountable. So I'm just back to, I think the rule should be what it is in only 2 states, Georgia and Montana, that if a judge uses his or her discretion and does not break the law, that judge should not be subject to a recall. However, there are other ways to hold judges accountable.
So I went ballistic about that case. I agree, very bad judge. It was just outrageous to say you can't call the folks who died victims, and instead you have to call them rioters, looters, etc. Look, you're obviously brilliant, Judge Cordell, so I would want to talk to you all day. I wanted to ask you about elections and whether judges should be elected, etc. But we're way out of time. So nonetheless, I know, but nonetheless, I can't help but ask about 2 things on a lighter note. So what happened in the case where a wealthy guy tried to leave his estate to the 4 cats?
And again, a Stanford person. He was an inventor and he didn't have any children, he didn't have any relatives. And so he left his estate to Tom, Dick, and Mary, and they were feral cats. And he left a lot of money and a lot of property. And so what happened? Each of the cats had a lawyer. I write about this in the book. And each of the cats had a lawyer. And then he left the residue of his estate to nonprofits that take care of pets like the SPCA, those kinds of things. So all the lawyers were in my court, fighting over this man's estate and representing the cats and I don't know what lawyer in the world drafted this will and a trust that left the cats that they should be treated in the manner to which they had become accustomed. What is that? So I'm not going to tell folks the end of this, but just know that it really was one of these cases that I just couldn't forget, and there are stories like that in the book. Okay, well.
The book is called Her Honor. It sounds like they might have had a cat fight about that. So just one quick last thing about that.
Sure.
How much did he leave the cats on average?
So I'd have to look in the book quickly, but it was $600,000 plus he had some real estate, some property. So there was a lot to fight over.
Well,
big cat fight.
Indeed. And then I can't help but ask this. Okay, what's worse or more gut-wrenching, filled with more conflict? Murder cases or divorces?
Divorces, hands down, divorces. When I was assigned to family court 3 years, by the end of that, I had served my sentence. I was just almost completely wiped out. So divorces without a doubt. I'll take a murder case any day.
Wow, okay. So now you know, you've been warned. All right, Judge LaDoris Hazzard Cordell, a bit of a living legend. Check out her book, Her Honor. Thank you so much for joining us, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.